Warning: this material has been copied or communicated to you by or on behalf of the University of Western Sydney pursuant to Part VA or VB of the Copyright Act 1968. The material in this communication may be subject to copyright under the Act. Any further copying or communication of this material by you may be subject of copyright protection under the Act.
Hi, I'm Jason Esau, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to what will hopefully be the first and planned series of seminars by the Digital Humanities Research Group here at the University of Western Sydney. And on that, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of Greater Western Sydney, the Darug, the Gandagara, and the Tharawal peoples whose land our 6 campuses reside on. Just for some background, for those of you who aren't familiar, the Digital Humanities Research Group was set up by Professor Harold Shaw and Professor Willard McCarty and was led by Professor Paul Arthur. The research group is based at the School of Humanities and Communication Arts with strong links to other schools and institutes. Its initial focus is to provide a framework for the many relevant digital initiatives and projects underway across the university, but we're also looking beyond these to the very active international digital humanities community in general. Intellectually, both independently and collaboratively, or in collaboration with others, we're looking to leading-edge research problems and to challenges as yet unmet within the discipline. We're fortunate today, therefore, that our first seminar is by visiting scholar Vincent Hiribarren, from King's College London, who has graciously offered to talk about his visualisation work in cultural and historical research and the highly fertile space for theoretical and critical engagement that the combination of computer and mind can create. I've had the privilege of a preview earlier today of Vincent's presentation, and I was keenly reminded that computing and humanities can not only give answers, but it can also demand answers as well. So on that note, I welcome Professor Simon Barrows to formally introduce Vincent.
Okay. It's a great pleasure to introduce Vincent Hiribarren. I'm looking for the next 2 weeks, 2 working weeks here. We'll take this time off for Christmas and New Year, and we've got some fun for good behaviour. We've worked together in the past, as you will hear, at the University of Leeds on a project on the French book trade in Enlightenment Europe that has been widely acknowledged, I think, as a model of future work on book trade-related issues, particularly those involving production, dissemination and reception of books more generally. And one of the attractions for me in within this work is a digital humanities group that was then still a dreaming Wayne and Kenneth I. When I decided to take the gamble of coming, a gamble I don't think I'm ever going to regret for a minute. What's resulted in the aim to work in this sort of environment. Since I took that hunt, we had seen certain reviews coming on our work. And I guess in my field, my twin fields, book history and enlightenment history, detail and figure of the last 40 or 50 years would probably have to be the Harvard librarian and professor of history, Princeton and Dr. Darnton, to just the honour of reviewing the database, which is based on an archive that he knows more intimately probably than anyone alive, except possibly some members of my team. He described what we did very flatteringly as a prodigious achievement, but more importantly, he singled out as the most important part of that work, the mapping work that Vincent undertook. He said that was the most impressive part of his review, which is publicly there. So that's one way to introduce Vincent. Vincent asked me to sort of lead into things, so if you listen to the background, it's slightly longer than ordinary introduction. If you're still happy with that, Vincent. So I first came across Vincent at Leeds, where he was studying for a PhD in African history. And he was one of the tutors in a first-year unit that I convened, in which we taught first-year students historical skills. Now in that unit, he taught them modules, I think, he taught his students from a book as an tutor did. And he chose to use Roger Chartier's book on the cultural origins of the French Revolution rather than something on Africa. And so it was when we were reviewing the teaching in the unit that we got talking about the wider question. And I have a project online that I've been doing, and it may interest you. You may be able to use it in your teaching, I give you access, and show him what we were doing in the French Book Trade project. And I said, one thing that I'm regretting at the moment, one thing we haven't got and I'm trying to work on, is GIS mapping. He said, I don't do that. I said, what? Can you really? And you've got an academic interest in the subject. He said, yeah, I used to do a lot of GIS material for my high school students when I was a high school student in France. And I said, okay. And I said, there's no budget in the project for it, but I think I've got the money from elsewhere and we can do something on the shoestring. Thank you very much. I hired him. He has never ever let on hanging out and spent on the project. My feeling is it was probably 45 times what I paid him for. Or else it's prodigy, he had able to do this work very, very efficiently. And I have told him I never wanted to answer that question because it will raise questions about exploitation and so forth. I assure you it will go very quickly. Never complain, always proactive, always going beyond what I dreamed of asking. And then at the end of that time, he was able to, we got him some work at Trinity and also College in Leeds, which is, I think, now Britain's newest university. He went on also to work in the Leeds French department, teaching language and culture, and finally got a job in one of our partner institutions, King's College London, as their partner institution for UWS Digital Humanities Research Group, because it was people both there who helped put together the very first blueprint for digital humanities in UWS, in the Australian and global context, Harold Shaw and William Custody. So it's a very appropriate place, I think, for Vincent to get his first job as lecturer in world history. And I hope that it is going to be the beginning of a further enriched connection between the two institutions. I might have another member of the project whose role was merely to be on the project board, but played an active advisory role. But the Wilson is also going there to be, I don't know what they term it, the Dean of Humanities, effectively after Christmas. So we've got yet another connection through this project. I think that's going to say something about the French Book Trade project itself, but actually I think it would be more interesting to let him introduce that aspect in a few words when it becomes relevant. Partly because he came to it later in the project as an outsider, and I think that gives him a better way of leading into the project, which is only part of his very rich work that he's been conducting both on the GIS side and visualisation of digital humanities in general. And there, without further ado, I'll hand over to Darnton.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Jason. Good afternoon. Thanks to all of you for coming here this afternoon. You have to apologize my French accent and my dictation. My speech has been quite quickly at the start, but I will slow down, I promise. It's not very slow. So thanks for coming. Initially, first, what we'll talk about today. First, I will talk about how I try to talk about digital humanities in my teaching, in my research, and try to participate in this project, how we try to map 18th century Europe in general. We'll talk about challenges, some of them were research challenges, some of them were technical challenges. I will talk about research questions which were asked by digital humanities in general, and we try to ask ourselves, and how these questions were answered partially by visualization that we'll talk about today, and how also we have to ask further questions. As we talk about very practical questions, how we try to manage some degrees of uncertainty with the database and with the project, and we try to map this or to visualize this. And we talk about photo visualizations in general, and as Nish mentioned about online teaching in general. How I try to embed it with my own teaching, when I was in as someone said before, and how I think these kind of the questions for the project also from our own research. So first, as I mentioned before, I wanted to teach this course based on this book written by Richard, The Cultural Regime of the French Revolution. And this man asked questions about the role played by books before the French Revolution. The question he asked was, can we really trust that books created humanity, which might have triggered the French Revolution? That was a big question he asked somehow. And that's somehow why I was interested in book history in general and how it was in book trade as well. So the next question we wanted to ask was, what you first like books they read, you believe what they read, and so on and so on. This was the first question I wanted to ask. And as I said before, I had a deep interest in these questions because I learned myself about these aspects in first from the student myself. I was talking about generations of like the process in the second century of the French Revolution, so I have to learn about the French Revolution. And what to know why it's so important and why it really happened. JS, I was talking also about JS skills because some of them when I became a geography teacher, but also I used some of that skills for my digitisation on something which has got nothing to do with book trade in 18th century Europe, which is Nigeria. I will give you a second while very quickly just to give you an idea of what all this. And basically the main idea is that I'll have broad teaching research interest in spatial history and historical humanities. And all this combines maybe wonder how to use math, how to create math, how to study math in order to understand history in general. As promised, let me show you some of these maps are created. Here we've got a map of colonial Nigeria and colonial Cameroon in 1904. And basically I was interested in the creation of borders in Africa. And I wanted to know where they came from. And what we learned most of the time that they were carved out of nothing, in Africa. That is becoming important now because the Europeans created them while they were, in Berlin, London, and Paris. And why is it for this part of Africa, and I want to say this part of Africa only, I said that basically, little by little, the Europeans adapted their borders to the previous borders of Nigeria, of pre-colonial Nigeria. It wasn't called Nigeria by then, it was called Borno. That's where the Borno, where my from was, I mean, the Europeans shaped their borders in Africa according to 19th century borders, what they thought were 19th century borders. Just to give you an overview of in the last 4 years basically. As I said before, this was in my it will be released next year by her. So these were the borders I mentioned here. So let's start straight away with where I've done with Simon, and let's have a look at what all these maps I've done for him. So what I've done here, I've got 18th century Europe, mapping the sales of books dealing with one fixed subject, so you can't read from the back, dealing with photography in general. The idea was that I wanted to know how French people and Europeans were interested in photography in the years preceding the French Revolution. And you can tell here, thanks to the work undertaken by Simon and his we managed to gather enough data, we able to map precisely where books dealing with photography were sold in the years preceding the French Revolution. So here, my job was to point exactly on the map where the books were sold, and we got some points, some big ones, some small ones, and so on and so on. Okay, for example, here you've got Paris and where the French court was at that point in time, their side. Okay, just an example. What we discovered very quickly is that we wanted to ask questions which were very typical questions asked by traditional historians. For example, here in this case, there was on the 12th of June 2083, there was a new law making all the books imported from abroad to be controlled by inspectors in Paris. The idea was to see how important this new law was for the French book market. Previous historians have said, well, no, they were not that important. Okay, the idea was that all the illegal books were all over the place in Europe, and these are partly influenced by the fact that somehow the French monarchy was desacralized and the French the French people in general didn't believe the king. For example, that book dealing with Maroc, in famous books about how Maroc was having affairs with everyone in the court. And here, somehow, we're trying to show how this new law has an impact or not on the French book trade market. And let me show you on the next map. We've got the same map, dealing with pornographic books, but after the law was enacted. So after June 2083. And what we notice here is the fact that, as you can tell before, most books were being sold in France, and after this law they were being sold outside of France. So somehow we have a very kind of like, traditional academic questions, what was the impact of this new law, 2023? And he had an answer, which was provided by the work and taken by Simon, which was that actually this new law had an impact on the French book trade, and the books had to be sold abroad, outside of France. And somehow this map somehow contradicts what was written about illegal trade before. And these are three examples of how we can use historiography to ask very practical historical questions. To answer them and seeing how trade was done after that with other countries. That's the first example we showed here. The second example I talked about today is an example which is quite interesting, which is the history of medicine, the history of science. It's quite big field in Museum of the history of science, and it's really quite interesting to see that. We've got maps dealing with inoculation. The 8th century was the century where science was so important that had the invention of the third vaccination at the 18th century. And so far as now with this map, that's the narrative that we have most of the time. I put that aside for it. Narrative we have most of the time. What we had cultural transfers about medicine, we had this story of Ebola in general, which I did in the 19th century, 18th century, discovered how to vaccinate people. And actually, this was more complicated. And this map shows us how actually this map was really more complicated. What you saw in the previous map I showed you was the book was sold in 2022 and not from the 18th century. And somehow we can talk about how ideas were spread in Europe until the 18th century. And we didn't have to wait for the invention or vaccination or something like that. So ideas spread, we talked about all over Europe. Here, I've got the idea, the simple idea that, for example, let's put a map here, that some ideas circulated in Russia, for example, but now in Spain, or not in the rest of Eastern Europe, for example. You've got also the fact that, remember, the Publishing House, which is located in Switzerland, and most books are published in French, so to have strong considered from French speakers everywhere. But still, I can say a lot about, destination ideas everywhere. So here, as we showed this good example, to the potential in general of mapping all of this for chemical projects. Now let's talk about how we talked about this mapping in general, how we conceptualize it. Here, first there was an intellectual challenge, okay? And the first thing I checked was that I had a very long spreadsheet, very long one, for our work, telling us how we thought about places. And the wealth of this project was that in this archive we had some very precise locations. Okay? This book was sold to Mr. X in that sense. And that place you could sometimes find them very easy, like for example Paris or London. But from time ago it was much harder to find. I go back to that one place. But here, what's been interesting that you have structure of data they have to think about. As I said, the archive mentioned every time a town or a city. And every time they have to do some research to know if the city was located in, let's say, in for example, France, for example, in the Fatal State, in Spain, and so on and so on. We would have to find in which subdivisions they were, in which administrative divisions they were in each country. That's what we call the territory here. Also Also, we thought about geographic zones, cultural zones in Europe, francophone zones, German-speaking zones, Russian zones, and so on and so on. So what we're going to show you here is that we've got a wealth of layers. Let me show you how this looks like on the interface. You can see here you've got a total menu, and in the end you can draw the map to show the degree of detail, more precise degree of detail. Let me show you this one, for example. Those. As you can tell, it's much more precise for France or Switzerland or what is modern-day Germany. And here, when we're talking about, when I'm trying to talk about more precise places, it means that we have to recreate experiments, the borders for each subdivision. And this for France, it was quite easy. For Germany, it was a bit harder to tell. So here, if we're rather interested in the research question, which triggers a technical problem basically. How do we map small territories, such as the German state, such as the territories in France? We can talk to them about a patchwork of territories in Anti-Region Europe, and here I've got to deal with the patchwork basically. So how do we deal with it in mapping terms? If you look at that of 18th century Europe, you can't understand anything unless you're a massive sea. And here we go. We just got better choice of choosing different levels for different purposes. Here, if you want to study how, for example, books dealing with inoculation were sold in the region of Montpellier, you can see the name of the city on the right here, you can see more precisely how this had an impact maybe on the region, because maybe this subdivision has a meaning. One meaning of this subdivision maybe meant that book trade was regulated from this region. But somehow maybe the choice decision wasn't the best one, because maybe this book circulated through other regions which are very close. Here, for example, this we don't know. But still, what I'm trying to say here is that we have to make choices. How do we map exactly the spelling of ideas? How do we map the spelling of sales in general? And how do we do it just with the choice of the decision like this one? I mentioned before, we also had geographic zones, which are very interesting in terms of cultural zones, especially for languages. I told you before, this book was published in French. French being the 18th century European international language, you got this quite important region. This borders were not political, you can say here. We didn't recreate a 19th century Germany here, even if you look like it. But still, we can talk about German-speaking countries, French-speaking countries, and so on and so on. And these different layers were created because we asked different questions. That's how it was created. We asked different questions from the start, of this big section we had, and we tried to implement it with digital humanities. That was the order things were done. That was the methodology applied to this. As I said here, go through 21st century zones, and so on and so on. What I'm trying to say here, I'm trying to show how we can unpack and how these maps were created. Because most of the time when you see a map, it's quite easy to take them at face value. If you have done some JS work before, you might know it actually takes quite a long time to create these maps. Gather the data, go through the data, things like, good data, it's exactly some to have problems with data, you have the right orders, which orders we can choose, and so on and so on. Then also gather the types of data. For example, 18th century Europe, you had the Borno Empire, where some cities, some parts of modern day Italy, or Syria parts of the Roman Empire, or even Northern Italy, were places like Darnton, parts of the classical territories, imperial cities, or they have universities. If you go back to the last point, universities, and we can think of the fact that it might have been a correlation between the fact you go to university in the town and the fact you go buying lots of books. That's not logical. And you can tell this, that's why we use the map for. Okay? That was the main, that's the way we go. So basically what I'm saying here is that this is an ongoing process. We ask the questions from the data we've got, and we try to answer with math in this case, but that could be visualization in general. And then show you that a possible future map. Nothing has been done so far, but who knows? Here, we've got the case of this map of Kenya, Hexagon map. Hexagon maps are the old-fashioned for the moment. They're not really precise because all the maps, if it's located in one hexagon, are represented like, on one hexagon, obviously. But somehow these are like a big map of, one country. In this case, these are the house services available in Kenya. And if you remember the Kenya shooting some time ago, remember the people who did the shooting came from the north, and look what's in the north? Nothing. That's another explanation as well, the fact that the north is developed in Kenya and how the south is much more developed. That's another story. Here, basically, we reach a level of detail with this database, which somehow enable us to talk about capitals, like Vienna here, so the other category that I talked about here before. Distance in the center, where the operation house is based, distance territory, higher education. But also this one I'll talk about because it's just by where I'm from. It's really out of nowhere, it's just by, it's in France, just by Spain. But still, there was one Swiss person who migrated there and who corresponded with this operation house. That's why we have someone talking to this Swiss operation house at the end of the 18th century. But all this to say that we've got a very rich level of detail. Data is being enriched a lot, and it's going to be enriched more and more and more in the following project. And somehow we can try to restore how can we map the complexity of data in general. And that's something that data analysts always struggle with, and that's something people dealing with big data in general always find difficult. And somehow we can ask the questions with historical data. Okay. Here, let's talk about visualizations as orientation here for this project. But first, I have to show you how this whole project was driven by this question. And these questions here are asked just to show you that basically what we're doing when we do digital humanities, then we ask the question, is the health a consideration of scholarship with other needs? We just ask very traditional questions, and we've got some correlation here that we prepare. Well, I'll back to the basics of digital humanities or the documents like this one. Okay. Then we've got different questions that we ask for the project, and that the map or the visualization tries to answer. An example here, how far the demand for textbooks differ over time and space? What was the volume of the STN trade with different regions? The STN is the publishing house in question. Did demand patterns differ between different types of sensors? So that's exactly what the map tries to answer. To show you one type of academic debate which was continued with let me show you this graph created by Darnton in 1981. Darnton, as Simon stressed at the start, was the main scholar dealing with archives and secrets. And as you can see, this graph in 1981 trying to show how books were spread, basically, those dealing with history, those dealing with literature, those dealing with science. Okay, so this kind of graph. What Simon and I thought about was to represent these categories in another way, in a more visual way. Let me show you. For example, here, we've got this kind of tree map here. Okay? You can click on the tree maps and see how important they were compared to each other. So here you can see proportions. You go through 10 categories divided in a different way. You can click on some of them. For example, history here. History. So you can tell a subdivision of history. So here what I'm trying to show you is that we've tried to apply different taxonomies taken from, for example, from the 18th century to this project. Here, this taxonomy was created before the 18th century, but Simon also created other taxonomy applied to each book already sold by this publishing house. That's what's very interesting about this, that we could have lots of data and we have to try to find the way to tidy it, to order it in different ways. That's what's very interesting about this. Here, you can notice, for example, that these taxonomies encompass very different types of topics. After we got history. In history we got Freemasons, we got Oriental history, we got maps, we got geography, we got church history, and so on. Okay? Just to show you the wealth of data accumulated throughout the years and how we try to map them. It's also something else I have to show you. Remember this first slide here? From that side, from this graph to that graph, somehow we came to show how we can also, with this new tool and this new perspective on history, how we can also go further than previous historians. And somehow we can say we can go way further, we expect the next step somehow. As we are showing you maps that Darnton will use in the places as well. The second idea, somehow we still using the second idea, you know, like with historians, but we're going further. Other questions, future questions, seminar, and I'm going to stop on the last one. Which authors, titles, and source of books were tested and where? What proportions of book sales were treated with enjoyment in each place? How extensive was the legal book trade? What geographic histories could our database help resolve? And the last one, did the STN sell more books in summer? Was there a month where the activity was particularly low? Let's have a look. See this map? 2.5 hours. Yeah, 2.5 hours. It's the first time we use it here. I think we saw data last night. I will report all the books for the presentation. It looks like a very simple graph. You learn them every day on the news. Very simple. But somehow, what I'm trying to show you here is that behind one of the discussion graphs, where people are selling more books in summer and winter, in spring and winter. Why winter and season? Because, for example, the road was up. You know, the really hard is considered. Maybe that, you know, we should also sell things to Italy across the Alps, and maybe that was possible. Maybe it would be interesting to cross-reference this graph with temperature graphs, or maybe some other some of the graphs showing like, you know, how hard was travel to Russia at that time of the year. When they send books to Russia, and then by then we see them like a quality book to reach Russia, maybe. Somehow I'm going to show you here that, you know, very simple questions. Somehow it's important when you show humanities. You've got simple graphs, but simple graphs would be, you know, associated with other graphs as before, and we can try to find to use maps at the same time. We map like, you know, the beginning of the year until the end of June. We can see exactly what the buttons how they, you know, and so on and so on. Somehow, database asks loads of questions, and we try to answer these questions with these visualizations. But somehow some visualizations ask other questions, and that's where it becomes a visual circle, because they use that cycle. Because the idea is that, you know, we've got visualizations, creating new questions, and so on and so on and so on. Okay? And this is one example we chose to stress the point today. Let me show you how we ask other questions, which are more practical for this project. This project was with lots of sources, for example. Lots of sources. And we'll go when these sources were being used to just provide our data. Remember when I said that our data was very important? Was because that, you know, we have some data which could be cross-reference all the time. What we've got here in front of you is the calendar view of the cell. Actually, we could have a number of orders done by the STN for each day of every year. We go here, for example, we know that on the 1st of January 1773, it was a Friday. I can tell this, a Friday. We've got letters telling us that one order was made by the parents to the STN. And somehow we can, with this visualization, know when these orders were made. And these simple observations tell us that, for example, the first time is Sunday, they didn't work that much on Sunday. Okay, it's the first time here. So colors, what are the colors now? Each color corresponds to a different type of source. As you can tell here, different types of source were used throughout the years. And like a gigantic jigsaw puzzle becomes part, and we become like, you know, rarer and rarer at the end. So here, we wanted to see exactly when the sources were being used, because we had the impression that, for example, the green one being what's called the date books, were called the date books, were being used most of the time. So when precisely did we start using them? When did it start being useless? As we go back, for example, here, in this year, 2027, you can see straight away when were discussed precisely in the database. And thanks to this database, you can check exactly when orders were made there. That's how we try to answer a very practical question here with this one visualization. Okay. Another example, I'm going to finish with this one, with this visualization. We have this man who was traveling around France, if I'm not mistaken, trying to sell books with his catalog, and you can tell when he made his orders here, okay, with the same font. That's the idea here. A second example I talk about is the Darnton cartography. It's not a big name actually. Let me show you what this is. I'll talk about it. There you go. Got 2027, and little by little we're going to see this changing. So, okay. If you hover, you can tell each town has a change over time, and the rest is important. What we're trying to show you here was first the relative importance of each town compared to each other. And it's something we couldn't exactly see, remember, on the previous map, because some circles were over each other. In that case, the circles can't go over each other. I mean, it's impossible for them to at the same time, here we can see as well, is the historical evolution. We've got a first map here, but how this changed over time. I think it's very interesting. Remember, we started at the start with United Forces for the first year. We've got people last year that are practicing hotels, and here that's what it shows. That's the last year here. We've got only a few cells, if I'm not mistaken, in Lausanne. In Bern. Okay, so it's Switzerland. So here, as I said before, we tried to answer some questions about the relative evolution of the trade when comparing towns between each other over time. That was the main question being asked there. Another relation we made, and it was quite interesting because this one shows exactly the volume of trade at the publishing house. We've got this massive chart here, which shows exactly how trade was spread. Not only can we see the fact that these trades that submitted were at the highest point in 2022. At the same time, we can see how they were spread between the Helvetic zone, so all the Switzerland area, the French zone, and also all the rest. As you can tell, one very simple observation was that the part of the trade for the other countries ended up being either Switzerland or France, Helvetic zone or French-speaking zone, became larger and larger over the years, especially towards the end of the life of this publishing house. At the start it was virtually nothing, and at the end it became more and more important. And here it was even more obvious on this graph. And how it actually was very useful for identification, for example, but also the fact that we could see it, we could check our data, comparing each zones with each one. Once again, here I want to highlight the fact that we've got very research-oriented questions, but also very practical questions which we ask, because we wanted to find how, to show exactly, to display how this cells affected from the Helvetic zone or the rest of Europe. I like to stress the fact that we need some very practical clue as well. So it's something which is very important. I stressed at the start that Darnton didn't have all these tools. It's true. And somehow now we've got all these tools we need to use them, we want to use them to show this. It's only practical for our own research, but also for our own publications. As I just said, I will use some of this for your own publications. Some of the maps I've used can be shown in black and white, and therefore can be copied and pasted, and so on and so on. Going to the icons and so on. So we have this kind of very practical mindset at the start, also to enable us to communicate our research objectives, but also our research outcomes. Something which is very interesting about Humanities, that there's a communication dimension, which is at the start also for our research, also for the publication of our research. Something I'm doing even today. Let's carry on with all this stuff. I'll show you quite a few ones. Now I'd like to finish this presentation with one last aspect of my work with humanities. As I mentioned at the start, I've taught with this database at the University of Leeds, and my idea was to make the students give me some feedback, not only about my teaching, but also by this type of research. So that was very interesting. I'm going to show you in a minute an earlier version of the map, and students were able to change the map of the questions. What about it? I split the class in four groups. Classes like, got 15 students in each class, so that's 3 portions per group. I gave each student a quote from the leading historian in the field. Here in that case, that was the start case. I'm showing you at the start. The idea was to talk about the disaccreditation of the monarchy and the fact that it was possible for people to criticize the French monarchy at the end of the century. I wanted students to check this hypothesis with the database. So basically, what that protocol and taken by scientists to give them a hypothesis. You've got data, and you made a test data equal to some hypothesis. And somehow it was, really a bit too straightforward, but somehow it worked in this case. I have some ideas, if we considered ideas before, I was better to mention these ideas about the disaccreditation of the monarchy. I was better to use this author here or some text we used in class beforehand. And for one group, it worked perfectly well because they created a short presentation showing me how they thought actually this quote was kind of right, because we had books in this database showing us that people read about scandal. This keyword was created by Simon. All these books dealing with scandal are books which talk about Louis XVI, having a lot of mistresses, for example, or about government in general, and so on and so on. So my students were able to create 3 maps, one of them being about cartographic work, also about scandal, and the last one was about, but it was the last one. It was about Louis XVI, actually. The idea was that here the students would take the hypothesis and try to explain or the country criticize one group. And somehow at the start it helped me my teaching, but also helped me for my mapping skills, because here there were a lot of things to change. Here, obviously, well, to do it so well, there was a white corner, the zoom wasn't working properly, and so on and so on. So basically, this couple of hours helped me with my teaching skills, my vision skills, and my care skills. Let me show you something I've done, something I've planned to do next month, actually not in February actually. I told you at the start I'm doing a long work, especially on country expenses, that I work on African history. And here I'm doing some work with the University of Leeds, it's called this grant. And the idea was that we gathered some data on one person called Alfred Hutchinson, got his name top of the screen. And just like on this person, one of these persons actually was condemned by the anti-apartheid in 1966 with Nelson Mandela. He was, President Mandela. And on this photo there, you can really see here, you've got Mandela, but also this not so long figure, Alfred Hutchinson. What is to know is that actually this case that was led police, Hutchinson in this case. And what we try to do is to map how this man escaped, the state. We know that because he wrote his autobiography. Okay, you can tell how he escaped, how he went to Beacon of Freedom at that point in time in 1960, which was Accra. Okay? The other interest I want to use that is that the fact that we got this recording from his widow, who talks about her time in Africa and his time in Africa and how he escaped this, how he escaped the African police. And I think it's quite important because African history is usually well important for our history, but it's quite important because this stuff can put together our history, recent history, classical recent history, somehow GIS, obviously, but also digital humanities in general. I will just make you listen to one extract of what she said to show an example of this kind of oral history applied to African history. Only 37 seconds.
South Africa in the 50s was in a real ferment, and although apartheid was implemented, it wasn't so rigorously. The Imperial Treason Trial was the sort of turning point in a way, but before that, people did have a certain amount of freedom to protest and have meetings and make a noise about it. And he became more and more involved, and it was because of this involvement with the ANC that he was one of the ones indicted for treason.
Yes, he was not a political party. Just I wanted to show you how I can place everything together in one map. And so we went through it, the role of activists from left, from 1950, 1950s here. And I hope I should put in some feedback to them to say very again, as I said here. Let me conclude then now. Let me conclude. Here. Here, the main point is that we've got social humanities and that in a social context. And because what context is quite interesting, because you've got something very much generational somehow. That's the idea that we've got the generational scholars who use new tools to carry on the work of their predecessors. And something which might be quite interesting for historians of academia here in the future is that somehow it's very transitory or cross-disciplinary, because we want work done by historians or by people doing English, people doing geography, people doing things. All this is available, it's possible because of digital humanities, and I think that's something which is very interesting, like doing research in general, and I think that's why I want to carry on this work of digital humanities, and I hope we'll carry on working together here in the end. Thank you. Some questions?
What do you have to
The start is nothing good, which is out there. Version 1, we will show the borders of the and after that, once the borders are modified, let's take another format. So that we can do it by computer. And that's what I'm writing for. Then, as you see, there are some JSON format and format. And after that, all the computer programs like Microsoft JavaScript, we just and build it forward.
It's quite an interesting story around the GIS work and why it wasn't incorporated in the original grant. That might be worth mentioning there. And one of the things that, fortunately, my early designers did was to take a philosophical view that we were only going to use freely available software. Basis so that we didn't have lots of issues, and that has remained a lot of everything to do. But at the time, obviously, RGIS and that were commercial systems at that stage, and also when we looked at maps, many of the map collections, the other had the we also looked at actually a group that were based in Switzerland, a very small operation, produced the best map, but they didn't like historians, they didn't make political maps to particular treaties. They had a map from 1700, another from 1800, and anyone who knows what happened with 17, 19 and 1800 knows the 1800 map is no good. And we were dealing with the end of the 18th century, so the 1700 map was very long before our time anyway. So, unfortunately, it's a decision that we had to develop our own map for that purpose. But I haven't got mapping the original project at all in there. But I was told that for online usage, the systems that were good enough to use for my purposes when we say good enough for my purposes. So in a sense, the technology overtook us, the project developed, and there were also other ways in which the technology came to our rescue. Students were enormously helpful for categorizing work for the Portuguese libraries in a very old-fashioned way. But would have been impossible because we actually had 2,000 books to sort of call up, and I don't think any major state library thought was fast enough to work for the keep that daily allowance. We had huge problems keeping track of which books they actually bought, depending on whether the French National Library or British Library will be familiar with this problem. So, yeah, that's the sort of parameters in which we operate.
You got an example of transition between like commercial software like organic project and what to do with the project of limited book. Basically the main color factor works on it. Not that this tool. Track through it there, like had this map which we created from this like data software because the license for them came from now where we were within. And they're quite slow and secretly they're good, but they're quite slow and items, whereas this one's faster and free.
And that one we looked at actually had a limit to how many downloads they had. We don't know how many people are going to use this database, but we now know that we're naturally that 5,000, 10,000 images generated in the first 18 months of math. Well, that would have exceeded our lifetime allowance on the life. They weren't prepared to move on that, so it's a chance for forever.
Any other questions? Where are we deciding the book from? How to do that?
The books themselves?
Yeah.
We didn't say books in this project, actually. We've done something, we've worked with some existing digitized books by Google. Can you go back? Yeah, let me show you an example. There's an API by Google Books which we can use basically, and where we just map the dissemination of these books, but somehow some of them haven't survived at all, don't even exist anymore. See, for example, we've got the second question here.
But that's not nothing you mean say all books, but the other
Data source for database.
Yeah, the transaction of the
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I can do a quick one. Simon and former research assistant, we started the day books, you know, all these books I mentioned before, on this visualization. And you have a look at one of them, and you try to think of the structure, all these structures, basically, data structure. Once it analyzes them quite well. And the research assistant was Switzerland, basically, and recorded in the data system, which was designed for this project. One by one, each entry, one research assistant. Yeah.
Well, everyone believes what we did.
So there was a design of the content, creation of the software just for this project, and then they sent it.
And then I did much of the data enrichment. Categorization of groups according to different systems, and there were 4,000 there, so that's the best part of the year.
Are they looking into the pages from those sources?
We weren't allowed to scan the material, the library and correcting pieces were trivially, so they're happy to do that in Switzerland. So basically the basic unit of what we did, there were two structures to the document, so our data entry system had to take that into account. There were what we might call rolling stock inventory, which has the title of the work, and then recording everyone that they sold them to in a particular period, and they started the next stock inventory. And rather nicely, it began with a stock page, it ended with a stock page where you could check the numbers, and I think it was a pencil and going on. The other thought was effectively books that were structured around whole orders. So you would have a certain item in a certain place and then a long list of the books that they'd taken. And for some periods we had one source, the other source we brought together, and sometimes we had sources that were structured in one way or another, but worked quite good as those negative booksellers authors, for example. So what that meant was that effectively in the ideal course, we've got an order for a load of books from a bookseller of the day, and we would record what we call initially transactions or transaction events. Now we're referring to them as events because we want to record other sorts of events in future projects. We're drawing on different sources. But what it builds up to is each transaction is the sale of a certain number of copies on a certain number of days, a certain day, to a certain client known in a certain place. And it's done at edition level and then amalgamated to all the copies of a work. So we can check on this book, for example, we can... It was covered with the story of the archive in for many years there were rumours that the archive existed and then it was surfaced in 1932 and was made, there was quite a lot of original work done made famous by Rob Darnton, who's like his career on stories that he bring out about archive, which was contained 2,500 letters. Sorry, 25,000 e-letters, which is the main source of previous scholars in the archive. We circumvented that, we said that in the case study on certain places, but the letters themselves don't entirely prove the source then, which previous workers put the good source in the useful then. I think it's one of the accounting sources that they don't match up. It's hard one about minor research questions, important one, in what's the link in cultural transmission between things that are altered and the actual reality of digital movement starts around Europe. So even our method doesn't help us deal with the fact that I know for a fact that two of the very largest consignment books, the FTN and then now coming to 13,000 copies, which is two works, never reached their destination. So that 2.5% just those two orders of all the books that they have traded. Which showing our database of being distributed to places. But close interrogation of the documents, we know, shows that they didn't actually reach there. And in one case, our data is so rich in recording the actual, the individual marks that were left on the booksellers' their crates, that I've been able to compare it with French government police sources, which record distinct crates, and I can show that exactly the same crates were the ones that were then taken to that leading copies of and these books were then liberated further down the road in 1789 when the vaccine was stored. So we've been able to cross-reference official and government sources and so forth to now to get extra details. But these are the building blocks. So unit scale of particular work. If there's one copy, that may be one copy of a 25-volume work or a 1-volume work, which case all sorts of headaches coming to final numbers. Because previous scholarship hadn't revealed that very often they got the individual volumes that authors supposed to relate to precision without going to full perspective. We have to identify volumes, where one volume scholars that complete work was relevant. 10 volumes there, or a 50 volumes there, because we couldn't really get anyone. We used that final volume group that approach and let we pinpoint those sorts of things as accurately as possible. And that sort of helps us. It's also in the pre-standing place. We meant that the data group to get off one i.e. the previous scholarship of the
Any further questions? If not, I'd like to thank Vincent and Simon for a very enlightening presentation.